The Book of Mormon is a series of lies inspired by a demon.
You believe in this book that was inspired by a demon, bro.
Yeah, the devil sure talks about himself negatively in the third person quite often.
If you just put the Mormons in a box of like, these are crazy demonic heretics, and then how are we supposed to work with you guys?
Nowhere near Christian orthodoxy.
What I don't think these people realize is when they say that it's heresy or it's not orthodoxy, they're just saying, oh, that's not what I believe. Of course, we're different. We have different beliefs. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong.
You saying that it's orthodoxy isn't an argument for whether or not it's legit. Christ was not orthodox.
If you're an evangelical, you don't have to accept this worldview that at the last day, God will say, hey, intellectually, theologically, you didn't quite grasp the mystery of my nature, and you're going to hell for eternity,
Yeah.
even though you worship me.
The key to all of that is who decides what is orthodoxy. Today we have some awesome guests, Baylor and Cade from All Those in Favor. And guess what? You can meet them in person because they just barely committed to coming to our live event on March 7th. Jackson, tell them about it.
So March 7th, we're going to be doing another book launch like we did with Jonah Barnes' Key to the Keystone, but it's for the Antichrist Playbook subtitle, which is very important, okay? I know it looks kind of ominous.
This isn't helping Antichrist. We're not trying to.
Exactly. You could use it either way, but how we intend it is to be a guide for young saints to avoid deception and defeat the devil. So Jeff Borders, he's an awesome guy. He's been a young men's president leader for like 12 years. And he kind of just outlines all of the Antichrist in the Book of Mormon and their different tactics that they used back then and that are still being used on you, I, and all the other people that are trying to follow Jesus Christ.
So if you want to go to this event, which I highly recommend because Jonah Barnes is going to be there, Brad Whitbeck, Andrew Woodmansey, David Butler, Mike Day, maybe another surprise guest or two. But it's going to be so much fun. So if you buy a ticket to it, link in the description, it will come with a book as well as a surprise t-shirt. That's an awesome t-shirt that you're going to want to have. And if you're a couple and you only want one book and one t-shirt, then there's a discounted ticket for a couple as well. So we hope that you guys can come. It's going to be so much fun, and hope you enjoy the video.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special edition of The Sick of Joseph. We have in the studio some up-and-coming absolute defenders of the faith. One of my good friends, Baylor Johnson and Cade. I don't know your last name.
Alvey.
Cade Alvey.
Cade Alvey.
They, what's the name of your channel? Kind of talk about your guys' page, why you started it, and yeah, what are you doing?
You want to go ahead?
Who are you?
Yeah, we're all those in favor. We're a voice, from those that are sustaining the leaders of the church. And, we really just kind of see all the negative church dialogue out there,
Name them. Girls Camp Podcast. Lissa Grenfield. All those.
No, dude, we're just trying to be a positive voice out there. You know what I mean? And promote interfaith dialogue. And Cade studies philosophy and, knows a lot about philosophy of religion and reads the best scholars. And so he presents that knowledge, and I'm there to laugh at him and make fun of him. And that's kind of the dynamic we got going on.
It's true. I mean, I studied philosophy, largely philosophy of religion at a very secular university, secular department at least.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a big gap in how religion, and specifically the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was talked about online and what scholars were saying. And I think a lot of our goal in our channel is to kind of bridge that gap, hopefully to get the critics up to a more respectable level, maybe kind of help them hone their arguments a little bit, and especially to equip people of any faith really with reasons to believe. But we're doing that from a Latter-day Saint perspective. So we're trying to popularize the best information and scholarship on philosophy of religion. And I mean, we do history and
all that
other stuff too. It's
and also ranking top famous Mormons.
Yeah. We do with a fat block without listening to any of your other stuff. Listen to this, okay?
No, we don't need to get political on here.
Oh, it's not political. It's just like regardless, dude, you have Napoleon Dynamite, bro, that you could have
John
chosen.
Heater.
Yeah.
John Heater.
Luke from Outdoor Boys we missed. We missed Mark Rober. We
Brandon
missed Brandon
Flowers.
Flowers. Brandon Sanderson.
And you pick Mitt Romney.
They did an LDS draft of like whatever, just their favorite, I guess, well-known members of the church, and it was less than
Hey,
awesome.
how many LDS presidential candidates do you know?
True.
Maybe
That's
two.
Joseph Smith, Mitt
Mitt
Romney.
I mean, come on, that's elite club right there.
But I've loved your guys' stuff ever since we followed you on Instagram, and I know you guys are starting to build your YouTube audience as well. So go like and subscribe their stuff. I promise you're really gonna like it. I think we agree on one thing, is that we're fine if people disagree with us, but we want them to disagree with us for the right reasons.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, a lot of times you have people on that are talking about the Book of Mormon. They're talking about the doctrines of the church, the plan of salvation, and they don't actually understand it. And you know that they don't understand it because they're using the wrong language. They are using the wrong ideas. And that's something that always frustrates me. Let's disagree, but let's actually be clear on what we disagree on.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And our channel too, I think we're trying to also ensure that members of the church understand where other people are coming from. We try to defend the positions that we're critiquing just about as good as we can. I had a professor who once said that if you're going to critique a position in a paper, you defend it first. And your defense of that position better be the best one that's ever been done of it before you critique it. And so that's kind of the model we try and take on the channel, is being as fair as we possibly can, just to because we believe the gospel stands up. We believe that we don't need to kind of go out and dumb down other positions in order to build ours up. And we can still engage with those positions and have a lot of confidence in our theology and our doctrine. And we really take that approach. And so I think it's worked. I think it's been great so far.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of the same approach that, for example, Jacob Hansen from Thoughtful Faith, the way that he does things is, it's like the way he describes it is, we need to stop being on the defense all the time. Like, we're always defending the gospel.
Absolutely.
Like, we should be confident in everything that the gospel brings, the restored gospel. And so being offensive doesn't necessarily mean going out there and trying to tear other people down. It means going out there and just boldly sharing, like, this is what we believe, and this is why we believe it. And there's actually a ton of reasons why, we hold this position.
Yeah. And like recently, we've kind of all come to discover that we're standing on such like a strong position when it comes to, like, I guess, evidence to back up our claims, because with that atheist guy, Alex O'Connor, right? He had an interaction with Jacob Hansen where Alex O'Connor's big thing is like, there's very little, there's no firsthand accounts of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, or like anything of the life of Jesus Christ. And Jacob Hansen talked to him. He's like, well, with our religion, we actually have over a dozen firsthand accounts of witnessing the golden plates and the translation of the Book of Mormon. And like that's a huge thing that a lot of times we just gloss over, just because from the beginning of time, freaking Governor Boggs, he just has been ripping on us, exterminating us. And so now we're just coming from this place of like crawling out of our holes. Like, we're actually like, we're pretty reasonable. Like, don't hit us though,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What's something that's been surprising to you, Baylor, is you guys have like stepped out into the online world, defending or sharing the gospel and stuff like that?
Sure. I think, along what we're talking about, I think mostly people coming from the evangelical position trying to evangelize Latter-day Saints to their worldview. I think it's funny. I think those of us that have served missions, we almost have like a soft spot for them.
Yeah.
Because I see them. Yeah. And like when you see them just making a very uncompelling argument, where it's just like, oh yeah, like, they're spreading falsehoods that have been addressed for decades. And like very frequently I'll be like, hey man, if you have a desire to evangelize Mormons to your position, here's how you should do it. And like kind of like trying to help them out, because like Cade says, like, I'm not afraid of this position, but I'd much rather have a productive dialogue where you understand what we believe. And it's like, yeah, look at my sources here. It's the King Follett Discourse, teachings, like Journal of Discourses, page whatever. And it's like, okay, obviously you haven't read any of these things. You're just quote mining from anti-Mormon websites.
Yeah,
it's like, how about you open up the sacred books? The same way when we were on our missions, if we were going to engage with someone from any faith, it was important that we understood the background of that
best
faith.
that we could.
And so, but along with that, there's been a lot of really, especially on YouTube, I've been surprised how many people have commented that are very thoughtful and very informed. And so,
yeah, one thing we've been surprised about is how many people come out so hard in the comments, and then we address them directly kindly. Like, we'll be like, oh, thanks for commenting. We appreciate it. We'd love to talk to you on the phone about. And then the first thing, we've talked to probably 2 dozen people maybe at this point that like came out so hard at us in the comments, like way hard. And then the first thing they say when we get on the phone with them is like, "Hey man, I just want to apologize. I'm sorry.
I was having a bad day.
I was having a bad day." Like, so that's one thing that's given me hope, is that I read a lot of the negative comments on there, and I just realize that they aren't talking to human beings. They don't feel like they're actually talking to a human being. They're talking to ideas. And if I was having an actual conversation with them, they'd most likely be more reasonable. There are some crazy guys out there, but
Gotcha.
you know,
Oh,
And one of those crazy guys, we're gonna put on blast today. Just kidding. No, but there's a pastor out there named Mark Driscoll. Mark, hi. I know you're watching this. You're
a big subscriber. That we know you subscribe to the channel.
Clearly, from this video that you made, you're very educated on our beliefs and the keystone of our religion, the Book of Mormon. Of course, the Yale version. If you haven't read the Yale version, you haven't read the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
That's a separate video.
Never read.
But we have a video that he posted not long ago that he's reacting to a very manicured snippet of our interview that we had with John Dehlin. It was like 6 hours long on Mormon Stories podcast.
And to be fair, before we get into it, he probably doesn't know who John Dehlin is. This probably just popped up in his feed, and he's seeing it and he's going in. But what we're going to show, Mark, is that John Dehlin probably isn't someone you want to be aligning yourself with on here. And we'll get into it later, but we agree with you. I actually like a lot of your videos, and I hope that this video is more of like a, hey, instead of like bashing on each other, why don't we work together in the way that we can work together? You know what I mean? So let's watch it though. Let's see what
Brandon
Driscoll had to say.
Roll the clip. Say, we know that the Book of Mormon isn't a historical.
We do. Everyone but Mormons know that.
If the Book of Mormon's historical, then you're going to make changes. There's so many people that started off not believing it's historical.
That's not why. It's because it's got horses and wheat and steel. And because the genetics of the Native Americans go to Asia, not Israel. You have to hold science loosely, because if you hold science tightly, you can't accept core scripture. You're basically saying that you have to read the Book of Mormon until you're dead, or you can't have a valid view of its science.
The Book of Mormon is a series of lies inspired by a demon that are completely mythical, have no basis in reality, pervert and distort the gospel of Jesus Christ, are an abomination, nowhere near Christian orthodoxy, and places and things that are mentioned have no historical possibility of any sort or kind. Other than those minor exceptions, the Book of Mormon is fantastic.
It's actually pretty funny.
That's a good line, actually.
Good closer there.
Exceptions. The Book of Mormon is fantastic.
Oh man. So Mark,
A lot of claims
we
there.
just want to talk to you for a little bit, and everybody else watching. One, I would be very interested to see if Mark has read the Book of Mormon. Most of the time, and this has been my experience, as people have talked about the Book of Mormon and have had huge critiques of it, every single time actually up to this point that I've talked to them and they weren't a previous member, they haven't read the Book of Mormon. And you ask them why, and they're like, because I'm not going to waste my time on that. Yeah. And it's like, if I was a critic of a certain movie, if I was a movie critic and I wrote a critique of a movie that I hadn't watched, would anyone take it seriously?
Probably not. No.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And so so I don't know if Mark has read it, but that is something that always frustrates me when I've talked to people that critique the Book of Mormon that hard. You know what I mean?
I think the key word there that kind of keys us into the perspective he's coming from was orthodoxy.
Mm-hmm.
And the history of the words heresy and orthodoxy is so fascinating to me. It's one of my favorite topics.
Tell us.
So heresy and orthodoxy are basically just describing what the bounds of your own faith tradition are. So heresy is anything outside of your own faith tradition. Orthodoxy is anything that fits within inside those boundaries. And for centuries, the early church would persecute heretics. So anyone who believed these heresies, they were kind of seen as like a virus, because like you could potentially send someone to hell if you don't believe in orthodoxy. So these people were like justifiably persecuted or even tortured or put to death.
But real quick, the key to all of that is who decides what is orthodoxy and what is heresy.
Exactly. And that's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
In the so John Locke, everyone's familiar with John Locke. He wrote this extremely famous, I think it's one of like the best like pieces of Christian literature, most influential ever. He wrote this letter called The Letter Concerning Toleration. And in it, he has this line where he says, everything is orthodoxy unto itself. And so what I don't think these people realize is when they say that it's heresy or it's not orthodoxy, they're just saying, oh, that's not what I believe. Duh, of course, we're different. We have different beliefs. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong. Like I think today it's kind of just heresy has become a catch-all term for just anything wrong. But that's not what it means. All they're saying is you're outside of the bounds of what my tradition teaches. And everything is orthodoxy unto itself. And so what he's saying is you guys aren't like me. And that's fine. Like we're going to say, yeah, we're a little different. You're going to Kendrick Lamar quote? Is that where you're going to
go? They ain't like us. They not like us. No, but he's saying, Cade, you believe in a book that was inspired by a demon. You believe in this book that was inspired by a demon, bro.
Yeah, that's a pretty hard claim right there. Like he's talking a fact that he knows that this book was inspired by a demon.
Yeah, like, dude, obviously the demons are getting together and they're like, bro, you know how we keep them under our grasp? We teach them this. We say, oh, beloved brethren, turn away from your sins. Shake off the chains of him that would bind you fast. Come unto that God who is the rock of your salvation. Okay, this demon, he's spitting bars like this. Prepare your souls for that glorious day when justice shall be administered unto the righteous, even the day of judgment, that ye might not shrink with awful fear, that ye may not remember your awful guilt, imperfectness, and be constrained to exclaim, holy, holy are thy judgments, O Lord God Almighty. But I know my guilt. I transgress thy law, and my transgressions are mine. And the devil hath obtained me, and I am a prey to his awful misery, bro.
Yeah, obviously, if you're a demon, you're going to put quotes like that.
Yeah, the devil sure talks about himself negatively in the third person quite often.
Exactly,
he's inspiring the book.
Another thing, too, to point out with what you're saying about orthodoxy is Christian orthodoxy is what is generally accepted, right? This is what whoever it is, because even the evangelicals and the Catholics, they have the creedal Christians. That's really what he's saying. You're not a creedal Christian. You don't believe in the Trinity as explained in the creeds. You don't believe in the nature of God as explained in the nature of Christ in the creeds. And so essentially saying, look at all of these people. You're this little bit. Obviously, you're wrong. And all I want to read is this. Enter ye in that straight gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be that go in at it. Because straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. And this isn't I'm not doing this as a dig to be like, look, he's on the wide gate and he's going to hell or anything like that. What I'm saying is, you saying that it's orthodoxy isn't an argument for whether or not it's legit. Christ was not orthodox in his day. The apostles, and there even was contention among the apostles themselves after Christ's death on what was orthodox. David Butler, who is a friend of the channel, has been on here a ton. He is writing a book right now, and one of the chapters he's talking about the fight between Paul and James, the brother of Jesus. James, the brother of Jesus, who is the apostle in Jerusalem, and Paul's going out there, and they disagree heavily on what Christian orthodoxy is. They eventually both are dead, and then who decides what Christian orthodoxy is? The emperors and the whoever filled in the power gap after they died.
For a long time too, I mean, there was no separation of church and state. It was just whoever's in charge of the magic, like whoever's in charge of the Roman Empire is kind of just who is creating the rules on what's acceptable and what's not. But it does, for centuries, it warranted all sorts of terrible legal implications. And luckily now we live in a society that has the separation of those powers. But I think now it kind of just results in angry YouTube videos and comments, luckily. So, I mean, I'll take that over
Baylor
being burned and tortured.
That is true. I will take that over that. Baylor, you want to know what these demons are trying to get you to do, bro? These demons are trying to get you to come unto Christ, okay? Be perfected in him and deny yourselves of all ungodliness. And if you shall deny yourselves of all ungodliness and love God with all your might, mind, and strength, then is his grace sufficient for you, that by his grace ye may become perfect in Christ. And by the grace of God ye are perfect in Christ. Ye can in no wise deny the power of God.
Well, dude, actually, like the way it says, then you'll be perfected, it kind of makes me think you're saying works are more important than grace, man.
Oh, yeah.
You got it, dude.
And since I've read that one verse and no other verse in the book, I'm going to interpret that to mean that thing, even though there's a million other verses that do not interpret that way.
Yes. These demons are so freaking...
It's so cunning, dude.
Cunning. But, I mean... Okay, if I'm stepping into their shoes, right? Because you were saying, was it just before we started recording, to like, if you were going to critique someone's argument, then you
while we were recording.
Oh, okay. Dude, my mind's crazy.
Yeah.
But to get into their shoes, right? They have such a different view of like the nature of God and Jesus Christ, right? And so I guess from their perspective, because we believe not in like the triune God, the triune idol, right? The Trinity, I guess from their point of view, if the Book of Mormon and like the doctrine of the church doesn't align our belief of the nature of God to their understanding, then from their perspective, we're worshiping a false God, right? And then obviously that's kind of the work of Satan, right? I guess, is that fair to say from their perspective? That's probably what you're thinking.
They'd get.
Yeah, and I think I would just push back on it. Like if we were going to sit here and we're talking about like the Oval Office or something, I've heard this used as an example, and I say the carpet's green, and you say the carpet's white. I don't think any reasonable person would come around and say, oh, well, you're talking about two different offices. Those are two entirely, like, you have the wrong office. You're not talking about the Oval Office. You must be talking about some other office. That doesn't really make sense to me. Like, just having different perceptions of the qualities of the thing that you're talking about doesn't really, at a certain point, it probably warrants a new classification. But, I mean, we're both talking about a deity here. We're both talking about
the same deity.
Yeah, like, I don't see enough difference to say that we're both talking about different gods. Like I don't see a reason to kind of split the two.
For sure. And for example, Jackson knew Baylor before today, and I didn't. And so my understanding of what Baylor is going, if someone asked me who's Baylor, I would give an answer. Jackson would give an answer. Your brother or sister would give an answer. Your dad would give an answer. But it doesn't mean you're a different Baylor. You know what I mean? It's the same Baylor coming from different perspectives. Now, we believe that Joseph Smith had a theophany. He had an experience where Christ, the Son of God, and God the Father appeared to him. And he had an intimate experience with them, being able to see them and talk with them, right? And so because of that, a doctrine was restored that had been lost throughout the ages, which is that God the Father and the Son are distinct, separate beings with one purpose, and they both have bodies. And so because Joseph Smith had that personal relationship with them, yes, we believe that. But does that mean we're talking about a different Jesus, or we're talking about a different God than everyone else? I would just say people should take seriously the claim that Joseph made, the claims that he made, and then find out whether or not they want to believe them, instead of just throwing them out because they're not the exact same as theirs.
Dude, if only we had some sort of New Testament story or account of like maybe like a disciple that was like being stoned to death and then saw like God the Father and then his Son on the right hand, like two separate beings, and like,
wait a second. That's Acts 7:52.
Shout out Stephen, dude. But obviously he didn't actually mean on the right hand. It meant it was.
He meant he was standing on the right hand.
That was connected to him, and it's one triune.
A lot of Protestants have told me that they like that verse doesn't really bother them just because they are two separate persons. Like that it can appear that way, and obviously we're gonna disagree. Like,
but God doesn't have a body though.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the
We have
key.
hearts and passions.
That
So
is
how
the
can you stand
whole
on the
key
right hand
is
of-
Exactly.
if the people who attack us online could just understand, hey, there's really one difference in our theologies, and it's that God the Father has a perfect body.
Mhm.
And it's
That's
like
a big one.
we don't think God the Father's created. We don't think Jesus is created. We believe in God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit. We believe their divinity is eternal. Like we're on the same page on all these things. It just comes down to vocab. Like where we say, oh, they might be different beings, they would say, oh, they're distinct persons. And to us, we hear that and you'd be like, that's the same thing, right? And it's just this vocab thing. And there's really so much more common ground. And every conversation I've had with whether it be Trinitarians or people who come from a more creedal Christian worldview, it always boils down to like, okay, so you're telling me the only difference is that you believe God the Father has a perfect body like Jesus Christ? It's like, yeah, that's really the only difference.
Yeah, that's the big difference that we have in terms of the Trinity. The other thing with the nature of God is we don't believe that God created everything out of nothing, and that's a huge breaking off point as well. That said, one thing that we want to talk about, Mark, because you probably didn't know this, but the clip that you got from is
Andy's probably still watching.
He's probably still watching. For sure he's watching. He's a subscriber. But
Is he actually?
no.
Okay.
No, he's way bigger than us. He probably never he watched that video because someone sent it to him probably.
But he is a donor, and that's the only reason that we have the lights on right now.
But he donates heavily to the show. No, but the guy who we were talking to, his name is John DeLynn. John DeLynn has a podcast called Mormon Stories, and we're just going to show you a clip of who you are kind of. Obviously, I'm not saying you're aligning with him, but you're aligning with him on this thing, on this subject. So let's just watch a clip from one of his episodes to kind of get an idea of who John DeLynn is.
And that's why even the teaching of sin or original sin, and even the teaching of the need for an atonement, we all have positive feelings about Jesus, but it's actually, the atonement is actually an insidious doctrine because it's all based on a deficit model of your brokenness and you needing someone to make you clean and to make you whole.
Boom.
And that's
Boom.
complicated because
So what frustrates the beans out of me, Mark, is when evangelicals, they just end up adopting all the atheist arguments against us.
And the anti-Christian, like, because John DeLynn isn't just like he doesn't like the Mormon church. He believes that the atonement of Christ is an insidious doctrine. He thinks that Jesus was like this nice guy that came, but to believe that he's the Son of God is actually a bad thing.
Yes, and has a negative outcome. And so then when you're adopting these same arguments, especially about like all the anachronisms and stuff like that, like we could go through the whole, show me the proof of the Exodus from Egypt and all these other stories in the Bible that, I assume that you still have faith in and believe.
But Egypt is a place that we know, and we know where the Red Sea is and all this stuff. Like, but sorry.
Yeah, but it's just so frustrating because those exact same arguments that are used against you to discredit your faith, you're then taking those and you're like, Mormons, you guys suck too. It's like, dude.
When they all rally around that, they're all like, oh yeah, like with the whole orthodoxy heresy thing, it's like people are always like, oh yeah, like Mormons are wrong, like bashing on them. And I love how often this plays out in the comments where someone's like, Mormons, you need to repent, like partake of the Eucharist. And then someone's like, whoa, no. Like, and it's like, and it all comes out as like, dude, you guys are not, you don't agree on your orthodoxy. And it's not just on, and people will be like, well, no, we agree on the main things. It's like, no, there's some really major stuff
Yeah, they
you
say
guys
that.
disagree on.
And you're like, well, is it essential to be baptized to enter the kingdom of God? They're like, no, but like it's a good thing to do. It's like,
Well, the Catholics believe.
Well,
it.
and some
It's
people
essential.
totally, yeah. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
that'll divide everyone into 32 clean pieces.
yeah.
Also, Mark, is that this guy's
Mark
name?
Driscoll, yes.
Yeah, Mark. So I think what is interesting is John DeLynn's thoughts on the atonement. I don't know if John is aware of like the kind of theological background of atonement studies, but there's like dozens of theories of atonement on like how it works.
Yeah.
And it seems like he's critiquing this model called the penal substitution model, which almost doesn't exist in Latter-day Saint
Theology.
culture. It's basically like we are deserving a penalty, and Jesus took that penalty. And I mean, there's some times where like Latter-day Saints will like share like a story or something that kind of seems to
that.
indicate the penal substitution model. And I think there are certain aspects of it that like kind of strike our hearts a little bit, like Jesus taking our punishment. That really resonates with us. But for the most part, that's a Protestant view, the penal substitution view. maybe a little bit Catholic. I'm not entirely sure where they kind of align.
Yeah.
But for anyone who's interested, there's a book called Latter-day Saint Perspectives on Atonement. And
Okay.
I think everyone should go check it out. It kind of goes through all the theories, kind of says.
Yeah,
Who's
what's
it
the
written by?
What's the 30,000-foot view of some of those, of the Latter-day Saint
Yeah.
perspectives on it?
So the one I like the best is called the Compassion Theory of Atonement. It kind of requires a Latter-day Saint view, in my opinion, because we existed eternally, and Christ, in order to enter into a compassionate relationship with us, and in order to, sorry, I'm not explaining this very well.
It's all good.
So we existed before, we came into this world. The reason the atonement happened is to complete a compassionate relationship with all of us that allows us to become like Christ and to become like God.
Transformative.
Exactly. So that
More of a transformative power instead of like this, I got you. Like, hey, stay away. Don't punish him. You know?
exactly. Have you guys heard of that
I'm gonna
story
teach you.
where there's like a kid who it gets in trouble in school, and then like
gets
someone
a whip from
yeah,
the
and then
back.
someone else is
Yeah.
like going to come like take his beating for him. If you kind of take that to its conclusion, like if you were the teacher, would he say like, oh, well, someone has to get whipped, I might as well just whip this innocent guy? So I mean, that's a very common Protestant view. But like I like the compassion theory of atonement better.
Yeah.
And so John's criticism isn't really going to apply to us if we take a more nuanced theory of atonement into play, but it is going to fall against the Protestants. So just keep in mind that I think our faith tradition has a lot of merit if you're coming at it from a secular perspective and just looking at the teachings. Maybe the history is a little bit harder to swallow or something like that. But if you just kind of take a view of these philosophical and theological perspectives we take, it's going to be a lot more compelling. So someone like John is going to be, when he's talking about the atonement, he's probably going to be borrowing a little bit from Christian capital. And it may even be more incentivizing for him not to adopt something like that.
Yeah, and you know, that's a really good point. That a lot of Protestants and evangelicals have actually have watched Mormon stories. They just watch it because they're interested in like, oh, these crazy Mormons. This guy's taking down Mormonism, so we're gonna watch him. When we went on, we had a lot of like Christians who don't agree with us on anything, or on many things, reach out to us and be like, I appreciate you going on because it let me see that John DeLynne's not on my side. He actually is trying to tear down Christianity. He's trying to tear down Christ. And as Jackson pointed out, this happens a lot of times where it's just like we immediately hop onto the same ideas that that people that are trying to tear people away from Christ hop on, just because we think it scores us points against whatever religion or whatever. You know what I mean? So, Mark, that's one of the frustrations I have, because we actually agree on some really important things that are relevant in our culture right now. One thing I've heard you talk a lot about is the family in today's society and kind of the attacks on the family, on gender, on things like that. And we agree on all of that. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Family, A Proclamation to the World. 1995, the leaders of our church put out this proclamation with a bunch of like obvious things at the time. Gender's an immutable characteristic. Men have a certain role to preside and protect. Women have a role to nurture and take care of the home. They work together in unity. The most important thing is the family. Just like that. Like, you should check it out. Family, A Proclamation of the World. That came out how many years ago? 20. Is that 20 years ago now? Or 30 years ago. 30 years ago, before all of the craziness that's happening in our world. And to me, that is very prophetic for them to put out this thing that the church has stood on during all of this chaos having to do with gender and families and marriage and all of this. The church has had this foundation of what the family is, that we proclaim to the world that this is the standard that God has set for the family, for men and for women. And to me, that's something that's awesome. I hope that you read it. And I think it would be a powerful teaching tool for everything that you're doing. But if you just put the Mormons in a box of like, these are crazy demonic heretics, then how are we supposed to work with you guys on the culture war, on anything having to do with the furthering of the work of Christ to prepare for his second coming? How are we supposed to work with you if you put us in the demon heretic box? You know what I mean?
Have you guys ever heard of the term, there's no atheists in foxholes?
Yes.
So I'm going to share this and I'll stop yapping because I've been yapping a bunch.
But yapping, dude. I just yapped a bunch.
We're all yappers.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about this, altering this phrase a little bit into saying there's no religious diversity in foxholes. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So it was a little over a year ago, I was hospitalized and I was in the hospital. And I was like in the bed, my family was there, wasn't doing good, kind of declining a little bit. And none of my family, they wanted to give me a blessing, but we kind of had to go there quick, and none of my family had any oil. For those of you who aren't members or aren't familiar, we give blessings for the sick or afflicted with consecrated oil, which we believe has some, like these blessings, they can heal us. That's kind of
The oil is like symbolic of Jesus.
Of Christ.
Yeah. Thank you. And we didn't have any. And so a nurse was like, do you want me to call the chaplain? And we were like, does the chaplain have oil? What? The chaplain was this Catholic lady. And she was up there in 15 minutes, right at my room. And she had a vial of consecrated oil that she got from a bishop or something.
Bishop or something, yeah.
And she was like, and she like put it in my dad's hand, and she came over and she was like, this oil is going to heal you. And the best medicine is going to be this blessing you're going to get and being with your friends and family. And that was so profound to me that a Catholic in this type of moment came over and was like, yeah, this consecrated oil that my faith tradition doesn't accept is going to work. And I don't think when we're in the foxhole, I don't think any rational person is going to say, sorry, man, it's not one of the 7 sacraments. My priest didn't bless it. I don't think it's going to work. And ever since that moment, I've just really wished that our engagements with other faiths could kind of mirror that. And I've been really disappointed so far. So we need to do our best to kind of encourage that. Like, I really wish that, I keep forgetting his Mark. I really wish that like us and Mark could kind of focus on the fact that we do agree on most things and that we are both faithful people in a world that we're trying to make better and that we're trying to make more Christ-like.
Yeah.
And if our engagements with these people could kind of mirror that, that respect that I got from that Catholic chaplain that day, I think the world would be a 10 times better place.
That's awesome.
And what you're not saying, and I know this just from the little bit that we've interacted, what you're not saying too is that we need to like somehow pretend that we agree on everything either. It's like, no, we can disagree and still work together on these important things. And it is important as us as Latter-day Saints that we don't just like shrink into the like, hey, look we're Christians too. Please accept us. Please accept us. It's like, no, we are a lot different than the rest of the Christian world in a few core doctrines. And there are reasons for that. And I'm not going to change those reasons. I'd love to have productive conversation with Mark and with others. We've had productive conversation with Pastor Jeff, who's an evangelical pastor that has done a lot of work in the LDS space as well. We can have those productive conversations, but let's have clarity on where we disagree. Let's not just other each other by saying that you believe in a demon, you heretic, or like that's just not very productive. And one thing's for sure, we both believe that there is a second coming of Christ. We both believe that one day we're going to stand before God and we're going to be judged.
Every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess.
100%.
No, not the others. No,
Not them.
No.
But that's going to happen. And here's the thing: if we show up and God and Jesus are somehow this triune God, however you describe it, right? Then I'm going to be like, oh, okay. And I bet if God and Jesus have separate bodies, you're probably going to be like, oh, okay. Like, we both want to follow Christ. And it's not to say that these doctrines are trivial, but I think more than anything, my litmus test for whether or not someone is a Christian is not the same as yours. My litmus test is, are people earnestly striving to follow Christ because they believe in his power of salvation and that one day they will stand before him and be judged? And if they are working towards that goal, then to me, that is a Christian. So I think it's a cool definition.
If you're an evangelical, you don't have to accept this worldview that at the last day, God will say, hey, intellectually, theologically, you didn't quite grasp the mystery of my nature, and you're going to hell for eternity, even though you worship me. And that's obviously so silly. And one reason why atheists are so hesitant to engage with Christianity, because it's outright on its face philosophically bankrupt, and they don't have to accept that view. And I was like what you said about, we don't have to, like, people always accuse us, oh, you just are trying to act like Christians. It's like, no, like, or creedal Christians or whatever. It's like, no, like, we're trying to get rid of these straw mans so we can talk about what's different. Like, we want to talk about what's different. And someone like Mark, I don't understand the goal, because if his goal is to evangelize Mormons to his worldview, this would be the worst approach, right? To just completely misrepresent us, call us demonic. So the only thing that I can justify, you know, I'm assuming he's a smart guy.
Calling us believers in something that's demonic.
Yeah.
Make
Sure.
make him feel like he's,
It's like the only thing I can think of is, it's like, I guess it's almost like he doesn't want his followers to engage with our LDS theology. And I don't understand why that's the case. You know what I mean? You'd think you would just be willing to if you think that our theology is so wrong and so biblically falsifiable, why not just present it accurately and fairly? And where does the fear come from just engaging with our point of view?
For sure. And we didn't really engage with the exact argument. Well, because there weren't really any arguments made. It was just claims. He just made claims. That said, the Stick of Joseph, this channel for the last almost 2 years now, has been presenting very good evidence for the divinity of the Book of Mormon, for its ancient authenticity, both textual. We've gone into some archaeological theories and things like that are very interesting to look into. So if you're interested in actually checking it out and you haven't read the Book of Mormon before, first, get a copy of the Book of Mormon. Link in the description. You can get a free copy. And watch some of our videos, and you might find it interesting. You might learn something new.
Also, this is one last thing, and then we'll be done. But the thing about evangelicals that just bother me sometimes is I've spoken to a lot of evangelical pastors that hold courses on, they call it Mormonism versus the Bible and stuff like that. They basically hold courses to tear down our faith, basically. And that's where a lot of these members of evangelical religions kind of get this worldview from, that we're so wrong and demonic, because they're literally holding courses in their chapel of why this book is inspired by a demon from their point of view. And so it's just so funny that you seek to destroy others around you so that you can be the tallest one, instead of creating and like pushing people towards like
a better theology that you claim to have.
Exactly. And so do that, because I that would be much more appealing to me, and you just might convert. So
you just might convert.
God
Anyways,
willing.
Mark, hit us up in the email, jackson@thestickofjoseph.com.
You know where he's from?
No,
I think it's maybe Texas.
I would bet my life on
Texas vibes.
it. I served my mission in Texas. I would bet my life on it.
That's awesome. Well, love you guys, and until next time, stay curious and hungry.